All participants, please continue to stand by. The conference will begin momentarily. Once again, please continue to stand by, and thank you for your patience.
Hello everyone. Bon vendredi tout le monde. Ce matin, je veux parler de la troisième vague et des mesures qu'on continue de prendre pour vous protéger. Commençons d'abord par le sujet des voyages. There has been a significant rise in COVID-19 cases in certain parts of the world, as well as the emergence of more variants of concern. So yesterday, we announced new and even stronger travel measures. Since last night, all passenger flights coming into Canada from India and Pakistan are suspended for 30 days. Now, we know that it's not only about direct flights to Canada. That's why there will also be additional measures for passengers departing from India or Pakistan who come to Canada via indirect routes. These passengers will need to obtain a negative COVID-19 pre-departure test from the last country they traveled through before arriving in Canada. Just like when we suspended flights from the UK last December for similar reasons, our government will continue to do whatever it takes to keep Canadians safe. Ces restrictions s'ajoutent au prolongement jusqu'au 21 mai des autres mesures déjà renforcées. Les mesures en place incluent les tests avant et après l'arrivée au pays, la quarantaine stricte et le séjour à l'hôtel aux frais des voyageurs pour ceux qui arrivent en avion. Elles sont obligatoires et elles sont parmi les plus strictes au monde. Ceux qui ne les respectent pas font face à des conséquences très sévères. This morning, I also want to talk about the situation with the third wave here at home. As you may have seen, Dr. Tam presented new modeling projections earlier today. Across the country, the number of daily new cases has more than doubled in the past month. Hospitalizations have also increased and are still increasing. And there are more contagious and more dangerous variants out there. The situation is critical. But we can and we will beat back this third wave. What we have to do is clear. We need to stay home and avoid in-person contacts. And if you absolutely need to go out, in other words, for essential reasons, continue to follow public health guidelines. While we work around the clock to vaccinate as many Canadians as possible, as quickly as possible, we all have to keep practicing physical distancing. I understand that there's a lot of COVID fatigue right now. We all feel it. But the more we reduce our contacts, the faster we will end this third wave. I know it's not easy, but remember, this is not forever. We just need to hang in a little while longer. We need to protect our loved ones and essential workers. And if we do what we know we can do together, we will get through this. So far, we've delivered almost 14 million vaccine doses across the country. 30% of eligible adults in Canada have received at least one vaccine. Next week, we'll get almost 2 million doses, including our first 300,000 doses from Johnson & Johnson. Vaccine doses continue to be the good news we all need in what has been a very tough spring. While more and more Canadians are getting vaccinated right now, it's also important to plan ahead for the future. We've reached an agreement with Pfizer for 35 million booster doses for next year and 30 million in the year after. This deal includes options to add 30 million doses in both 2022 and 2023, and an option for 60 million doses in 2024. Pfizer has been a solid partner for Canada in this fight against COVID-19, and we're happy to be one of the first countries to secure an agreement with them going forward. These boosters will be the latest version of the Pfizer vaccine based on research and testing, and they will help us keep the virus under control. And the work doesn't end there either. We're on ongoing discussions with other vaccine manufacturers about their plans for booster shots too. Pour maintenant et pour l'avenir, il est important de continuer à développer notre capacité de développement et de production de vaccins ici au Canada. À ce sujet, j'aimerais féliciter la compagnie Medicago, basée à Québec, qui est maintenant la première compagnie canadienne à avoir soumis son vaccin candidat contre la COVID-19 à Santé Canada. Ça démontre qu'on a du talent et du savoir-faire ici au Canada et notre gouvernement va toujours être là pour encourager les scientifiques et l'expertise de chez nous. Avant de terminer à propos des vaccins et de passer à un autre sujet, je suis très heureux de partager que Sophie et moi allons recevoir notre première dose de vaccin cet après-midi. Comme l'Ontario a invité les gens de 40 ans et plus à recevoir le vaccin d'AstraZeneca en pharmacie, c'est maintenant notre tour. On a bien hâte. C'est un soulagement de savoir que ce simple geste aide à se protéger soi-même, mais surtout de protéger ceux qu'on aime autour de nous. Alors, si c'est votre tour, je vous invite à prendre rendez-vous le plus rapidement possible. En faisant tous notre part, on va vaincre ce virus. Sophie and I are looking forward to getting our first dose of AstraZeneca this afternoon at the pharmacy just around the corner from here. So if you're eligible for your vaccine like we are, make sure you get your dose as soon as possible. Our role as government is to keep Canadians safe. We're ready to do whatever it takes to get this third wave under control in Ontario, in Alberta, and everywhere else in the country. On that front, today, I have some updates to share. Stopping the virus from spreading is key. Since March, we've sent over 400,000 rapid tests to Ontario alone, and we're in the process of sending hundreds of thousands more. We're working with the Ontario government, the Red Cross, and pharmacies to distribute more rapid tests while making it easier for businesses to access them. We've also delivered medical equipment like oxygen units and ordered more therapeutics. And while we do all this, we're working with the Ontario government to send support to their frontline workers as soon as possible. We've identified up to 100 healthcare professionals, like ICU nurses and doctors, who can be deployed rapidly from federal departments to places they're needed most, including the GTA. This is the moment to all work together. Newfoundland and Labrador has offered healthcare resources and identified teams ready to go as early as next week. Other provinces and territories are looking what they can deploy too. We're ready to provide transport support and funding to enable them to help out where needed in Ontario. In fact, we've set aside $80 million in emergency funding to support the costs of these efforts. To frontline workers in Ontario, in Alberta, and across Canada, you are doing an incredibly important but hard job right now, and we're here to help. And to everyone who's stepped up to help their fellow Canadians, well, that's just who Canadians are. We're there for each other in times of difficulty, but thank you for showing the way. The only way to beat this virus is by working together as a team, so thank you all for doing your part. Cette semaine, avec le budget de 2021, on a présenté notre plan pour finir notre lutte contre la COVID-19 et pour aider les Canadiens à se remettre de cette crise. On veut faire en sorte que tous les Canadiens aient accès à de bons emplois, que les mères et les familles aient accès à des services de garde abordables et que nos aînés les plus vulnérables aient davantage de soutien. Par-dessus tout, on veut construire un Canada plus sain et plus sécuritaire pour tout le monde. C'est pourquoi on rehausse nos ambitions climatiques. Hier et ce matin, j'ai participé au sommet des dirigeants sur le climat organisé par le président Biden. J'y ai partagé notre nouvelle cible climatique pour 2030 qui sera maintenant de 40 à 45% sous le niveau des émissions de 2005. J'ai aussi mentionné nos investissements dans le transport en commun, les rénovations énergétiques résidentielles et l'électricité propre. As I said yesterday during the U.S. Climate Summit, Canada is raising our ambition once again on climate action. The strengthened climate plan we presented last December, along with our new Budget 2021 investments, will allow us to build a cleaner future and create good middle-class jobs. Merci tout le monde. Je suis maintenant heureux de passer la parole au ministre Blair. Bill.
Well, thank you very much, Prime Minister. I'd like to begin my remarks by just reminding Canadians that we are strongly advising against all travel. Now is not the time for taking trips abroad to other countries or even for traveling across Canada. As much as possible, we need Canadians to stay home, and we need them to continue to follow the public health guidelines, which are our most effective response to keep Canadians safe. Yesterday, we introduced some new measures, and I want to simply, I'd like to begin, if I may, by briefly reminding Canadians about what we have already put in place at our borders. You've heard us say a number of times, we have some of the most strongest measures anywhere in the world, and I'd like to take the opportunity to quickly remind you of what those are. More than a year ago, we banned all non-essential travel from abroad by land and by air for all non-essential travelers, and we took the extraordinary and unprecedented action of closing our border with the United States for non-essential travel. We imposed a mandatory 14-day quarantine period on all returning travelers. And we have also introduced pre-board and pre-arrival negative tests, so people have to present a negative test upon their arrival or even before they get on a plane to fly to Canada. We test them again upon arrival. We've been doing genome sequencing to identify variants if people do come to this country and are infected with COVID. We've also implemented post-arrival testing at day 10. For all international destinations, we've also implemented a 3-day requirement of government accommodation for quarantine. And we're following up on our quarantine orders by phone and by visits to ensure compliance, and there has been, where required, enforcement for those who choose not to follow our rules. I think it's important to point out that the majority of international travels are actually Canadian citizens returning from abroad. They wish to return home, and they have a right to return home. And our job from the outset of the pandemic is to ensure that we effectively manage their return so that they can do so safely and not represent a risk to other Canadians. And I want to advise you, these measures have been working. Since the implementation of these extraordinary measures, we've seen total travel numbers of people coming from international destinations to Canada is down by over 88% from the previous year. Cases related to close contact with a traveler account for only 0.7% of positive cases in Canada, and cases related to travel of an individual for themselves is less than 1%. We have demonstrated that we will always do what is necessary to keep our communities safe from COVID. We have, in those decisions, relied on the evidence and the advice provided by our public health officials. Yesterday, we built upon the border measures that we have in place by stopping all flights from India and Pakistan. The device that we use for that is what is referred to as a notice to airmen that essentially stops all direct flights. But we also know that the risk would persist if we allowed people to travel in connecting flights through transiting countries. And so we are among the only countries in the world that are also taking action to actually disrupt and break that travel journey, to require people to actually land, comply with all the restrictions and prohibitions that may exist in the transiting country, to get another COVID test in that country to prove that they are negative before continuing on in their journey to Canada. These measures will be in place for 30 days and they'll be reassessed at that time. But we believe these are the right measures. In addition, at all of our land and airports, we're going to ensure that at our passenger information kiosks, travelers will be questioned about their recent travel to hotspot countries, including, of course, India and Pakistan, and those individuals who may have been in those countries in the previous 2 weeks will also be subject to enhanced screening by our public health officials to ensure that they are safe to enter Canada. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have and we continue to take strong measures to secure our borders, to slow down the spread of COVID. And I believe we have demonstrated our resolve and willingness to add additional layers when that is warranted. Finally, I'd like to just remind Canadians, if you are traveling, it is your responsibility to understand and to follow all of the rules that have been put in place. And you can find detailed information at the Canada.ca website. I'd also like to take the opportunity, if I may, to thank our border service officers and our public health officials who are doing extraordinary work on behalf of all Canadians to secure our border and to protect our health. Thank you very much. And I'll now, if I may, turn over to Minister Anand.
Thanks so much, Bill, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here with you today. I would like to provide you with an overview of two important aspects of procurement as it relates to ensuring that our government sees Canadians through this pandemic. I will first speak to PPE, and then I will provide an update on our vaccine procurements. Over the last year, the federal government has secured contracts for more than 2.7 billion articles of personal protective equipment and other medical supplies. The vast majority of this vital PPE has been provided to support provincial and territorial frontline healthcare workers already. À ce jour, plus d'1,5 milliard d'articles ont été livrés et 40% de tous les contrats en valeur monétaire ont été conclus avec des fournisseurs canadiens. Parmi ces contrats, notons 2 contrats à long terme pour des dizaines de millions de masques N95 fabriqués au Canada par Medicom à Montréal et par l'usine de 3M à Brockville en Ontario. At the same time as our government 24/7 to ensure that the immediate needs of frontline healthcare workers were addressed, we were also looking to the future and taking into account long-term needs. Our contracts are indeed long-term in nature to ensure that we had and will have supplies needed for a possible second or third wave and ongoing into the future. The same is true with vaccines. As millions of vaccine doses continue to arrive every week into Canada and are administered at an ever-increasing rate, our government is also looking to what comes next. What about next year's doses and the year after that? Comme le Premier ministre vient de l'annoncer, le gouvernement a conclu une entente avec Pfizer pour obtenir des doses de vaccin contre le COVID-19 en 2022 et 2023 avec des options de prolongation jusqu'en 2024. Grâce à cette entente, le gouvernement du Canada aura un accès garanti à 65 millions de doses du vaccin de Pfizer au cours des 2 prochaines années et jusqu'à 120 millions de plus si toutes les options sont exercées. Our work on this front continues to be guided by science and expert advice so that we can effectively meet future challenges head-on. As such, this agreement with Pfizer will provide us with the flexibility to procure booster shots as well as new vaccine formulations to protect against variants of concern and vaccines developed for younger populations. This is a very positive development for all Canadians. Lastly, I would like to provide a quick overview as to where we are as a country with respect to current vaccine deliveries. To date, 13.7 million doses of vaccine have arrived in Canada, and we are within the top 3 among G20 countries in terms of total doses administered to date, average doses administered daily, and percentage of population with at least 1 dose. 27% of Canadians have had at least 1 dose of vaccine. Au cours de la semaine prochaine, nous prévoyons recevoir environ 1,9 million de doses, c'est-à-dire 1 million de doses de Pfizer arrivant au début de semaine, 650 000 doses de Moderna en milieu de semaine, 300 000 doses de Johnson & Johnson arrivant vers la fin de la semaine prochaine, la distribution aux provinces et territoires débutant la semaine suivante. In closing, I want to say that my husband, my sisters, and my father have all received their first doses of vaccine. I'm now registered here in Oakville, Ontario for my shot, and I very much look forward to getting that call to come in and receive it. We will continue as a government to bring vaccines into this country by the millions. It has been a very long year, and that light at the end of the tunnel is getting brighter and closer every day. Thank you. Merci. Megwetch.
Merci, Madame la ministre. Le Premier ministre et les ministres prendront des questions pour une vingtaine de minutes, en commençant par le téléphone. Une question, une sous-question. Prime Minister and ministers will be taking questions for 20 minutes. One question, one follow-up, starting with the phone. Opérateur, c'est à vous.
Thank you, merci. The first question is from Charlie Pinkerton from iPolitics. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My questions are for Prime Minister Trudeau and Procurement Minister Anand. Emails from staff in the Prime Minister's office that were made public last week show that Canada paid more than twice what some of its allies did for AstraZeneca's vaccine. Canada has not received regular shipments of this vaccine yet when it's being used widely in countries around the world. I'm wondering, what benefit did Canada get for paying a higher price for AstraZeneca's vaccine, or were we simply out-negotiated?
From the very beginning, Charlie, we were focused on getting as many doses as possible, as quickly as possible, from as broad a range of different potential vaccine producers as possible. That's why we ended up with a wider portfolio of potential vaccines than most of our peer countries, and a total number of doses that is higher per capita than any other country. Obviously, we've continued to work closely with those companies to get more vaccine doses in quicker, but we also recognize that the more we can get vaccine doses quicker, the quicker we're able to get through this, and the better it is for our economy. And that is what drove us in all of our discussions and negotiations: the protection of Canadians and a quick restoration of economic normality. But for more details, I'm happy to pass over to Minister Anand.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. We aren't able to disclose the price per unit for doses at this time in order to protect Canada's supply of vaccines. But as has been previously stated, we have negotiated very aggressively to conclude our contracts and to accelerate doses to Canada. And our government will stop at nothing to ensure that the health and safety of Canadians is protected. And that is why we put in place a diversified vaccine portfolio with 7 leading vaccine suppliers on the basis of the scientific and expert advice provided by the Vaccine Task Force and the Public Health Agency of Canada. It is very important to remember that AstraZeneca is but one of 4 approved suppliers, and by the end of next week, we will have all 4 approved suppliers having vaccines delivered in this country. And the benefits of this diversified portfolio for the health and safety of Canadians goes right back to last August when we were negotiating our contracts, where we were very aggressive in terms of making sure we had sufficient vaccines for Canadians. And the 48 to 50 million vaccines that will be here in this country prior to the end of June is testament to that aggressive strategy that we have consistently produced and brought to the table. And I will add that we have accelerated 28 million doses under all of our contracts to earlier quarters. Again, our objective all the way through is protecting Canadians, and our consistent supply of millions of vaccines, placing us in the top 3 of G20 countries, is testament to that strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Following up.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate those points about sort of the larger strategy, but I would like, along with answering my follow-up, if you can sort of touch on what exactly we're getting out of paying $8 for the vaccine that other countries have bought for $4. But moving on from that, President Biden said earlier this week that he's planning to send some more vaccines to Canada in the future, but stopped short of saying when exactly he would do that. Right now, with much of the country locked down and our vaccine rollout not operating at its max capacity, this would be a major assist. But in as soon as a month's time, according to your government's projections, Canada will be receiving close to the 3.1 million doses per week that the provinces and territories have said they're capable of administering in that same time frame. So I'm wondering, will you tell us what you're doing to secure these vaccines from the U.S. soon before it becomes more of a hollow offer?
First of all, we were very pleased that the U.S. was able to send us 1.5 million vaccines a number of weeks ago. We continue to work very closely with them, our closest neighbor, to ensure that we're getting more doses as quickly as possible. Those conversations, as always, will continue. Anita, anything to add?
Most definitely. First of all, your follow-up on the AstraZeneca pricing. AstraZeneca has been clear that it is offering not-for-profit pricing across the board. The prices differ across jurisdictions based on the other considerations that need to be taken into account, including domestic manufacturing capacity. Moving on to your second question relating to the United States, as the Prime Minister said, it was because of this very strong relationship that we were able to secure the exchange agreement for 1.5 million doses of AstraZeneca. We are continuing to negotiate on that basis with the United States in terms of the possibility of additional doses crossing this border. We are engaging at all levels, as the Prime Minister's call with President Biden suggests, and I too am in constant communication with Jeffrey Zients and his team in the United States. We should always remember that our portfolio of 7 contracts provides us with a basis for undertaking these negotiations. So the fact that we had the contract with AstraZeneca, for example, allows us to do the exchange agreement where we are drawing down on the 20 million doses that we have procured from AstraZeneca. We don't have additional details to share at this time, but we will provide information as soon as we receive it. We are pushing very hard to receive more and more doses from all suppliers and areas as soon as possible. Thank you.
Merci. Opérateur, prochaine question au téléphone.
Thank you, merci. La prochaine question est de Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. La parole est à vous.
Oui, bonjour, M. Trudeau. On a vu votre photo hier à la une d'un tabloïd québécois pour illustrer ou imager, en tout cas, l'arrivée du variant indien. Cette manchette-là a été largement condamnée par la classe politique, incluant par votre lieutenant Pablo Rodriguez. Qu'est-ce que vous en avez pensé, vous?
D'abord, je le prends pas personnel. À un niveau personnel, c'est pas préoccupant. Mais ce que je trouve avoir été une erreur de jugement, ça a été d'alimenter une intolérance qu'on voit malheureusement, qu'on a vu depuis les débuts envers les Canadiens d'origine asiatique et qui pourrait s'étendre vers la communauté indo-canadienne. Je pense que c'est un moment pour nous de se rapprocher les uns des autres, de comprendre à quel point nous sommes tous dans le même bateau et nous traversons cela ensemble. Et tout ce qui crée des occasions de stéréotyper ou d'amener de l'intolérance devrait être évité pendant cette crise et en temps normal aussi. First of all, I don't take tabloid covers personally. That's not what's at issue here, but I think it was a grave error in judgment to feed into some of the unfortunate intolerance and stereotypes that we've seen over the past number of months on the rise. The rise in anti-Asian racism and intolerance across the country. We certainly wouldn't want to see further encouragements to intolerance of Canadians based on what's happening in other parts of the world. This is a moment for us to pull together, to be there for each other. It's not a moment to sow division.
En suivi, Mélanie?
Oui, pour continuer peut-être dans la même veine, M. Trudeau, c'est peut-être un peu, je ne sais pas, éthique ou philosophique comme question, là. Mais êtes-vous à l'aise avec l'utilisation du terme variant indien dans la mesure où on évitait de dire, bon, au départ, virus chinois, virus britannique, variant britannique, ça passait. Là, on semble se poser des questions sur le variant indien, la connotation que ça pourrait avoir. Là encore, qu'en pensez-vous?
D'abord, je pense qu'on devrait suivre les recommandations des scientifiques et des experts qui soulignent très bien que juste parce qu'un variant a été découvert ou d'abord documenté dans un endroit, c'est pas nécessairement l'endroit où ça a originé. C'est pour ça qu'on parle plus de variant britannique ou variant brésilien. On parle du B1, du P1, des différents codes donnés aux variants. Je pense que de localiser ou de stigmatiser un pays ou un groupe de gens, c'est une mauvaise idée. Et donc, d'essayer d'utiliser la nomenclature respectueuse, ce serait une priorité pour moi.
Merci. Opérateur, dernière question au téléphone.
Thank you, merci. The next question is from Marieke Walsh from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau.